Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're jumping right into what is arguably the single most monumental achievement in human history. I want you to really picture this, okay? It's July 20th, 1969. All around the globe, millions of people have completely stopped whatever they were doing. They're huddled around their TV sets, families sitting together in total, absolute silence. They're waiting to witness something that had literally never happened before. Just imagine that global atmosphere for a second. We're talking about the largest television audience in human history up to that point. The sheer amount of broadcasting infrastructure needed to pull that off was completely unprecedented. And, it wasn't just a national event, it was a human event. You had a captive world, eyes just glued to these grainy black and white screens, as humanity got ready to cross a threshold that would completely change our perspective forever. So, how in the world did America achieve the seemingly impossible? Well, to really get the magnitude of this, we have to look at the vibe at the time. Honestly, the United States was actually losing the space race. The Soviet Union had already launched Sputnik, and they'd already put Yuri Gagarin into orbit. America desperately needed an equalizer. They needed a goal so incredibly distant and difficult that it would completely reset the playing field.
Part 1. The Impossible Promise.
The stakes were officially set back in 1961, and that's when President John F. Kennedy made a really bold promise. He declared to the world that America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. Now, here's the crazy part. At the time, a lot of scientific experts honestly thought this was a pipe dream. It was impossible. The lightweight metals they needed for the spacecraft literally didn't even exist yet. And the complex orbital mechanics they'd have to use, basically just theories on a chalkboard at that point. Well, it took nearly 8 years of just relentless, nonstop work to turn that impossible promise into reality. We're talking about a staggering 400,000 people. At its peak, this massive project was eating up almost 4.5% of the entire federal budget. You had scientists, engineers, and astronauts working day and night, testing totally unproven spacecraft, and quite literally risking their lives to pull this off. Part 2, Journey to the Moon. All of that blood, sweat, and tears brings us right to launch day at the Kennedy Space Center down in Florida. This was it, the awe-inspiring moment the giant Saturn V rocket lifted off the pad. I mean, try to wrap your head around this. It generated a massive 7.5 million pounds of thrust. This absolute marvel of engineering just roared into the sky, carrying Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. But it wasn't just carrying a crew. It was literally lifting humanity's greatest hope up into the stars.
And wow, did they have an incredibly long way to go. 240,000 miles across the dark, freezing, empty void of space. To cover that massive distance, they were moving at roughly 25,000 miles per hour during the translunar injection, just to reach the moon.
Once they finally got there, the crew actually had to split up. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin crawled into a separate, spider-like spacecraft called the Lunar Module, callsign Eagle, to head down to the surface. Meanwhile, think about their crewmate, Michael Collins. He had to stay completely alone in orbit above the moon, manning the command module. He was staying behind to keep the mothership running, which was absolutely crucial for the orbital rendezvous they'd need to actually get back home.
Part 3. A tense descent.
Now, as the Eagle slowly started its descent toward the lunar surface, things did not exactly go smoothly. Out of nowhere, the mission was hit with unexpected, genuinely life-threatening problems. Down on Earth, the folks at Mission Control could basically only sit there and watch helplessly as the tension just skyrocketed. Everyone was holding their breath. Would they make it safely, or was disaster imminent?
The dangers were just piling up one after another. Suddenly, the onboard computer starts flashing this infamous 1202 program alarm, basically screaming that it's overloaded. So in a massive split-second decision, Neil Armstrong actually takes manual control of the spacecraft. He has to manually search for a safe, flat landing spot. And he's doing all of this while battling these blaring warning alarms, completely aware that they have less than 30 seconds of landing fuel left.
Lunar dust is kicking up violently right outside the window, and then the engine finally cuts off. The spacecraft settles. At exactly 4:17 p.m. Eastern Time, that absolutely agonizing tension finally breaks. History was made. During those last few terrifying seconds, Armstrong's heart rate had actually spiked to 150 beats per minute. But despite that, this remarkably calm, collected voice comes over the radio system, delivering one of the most famous updates ever spoken. Houston, Tranquility Base here. the Eagle has landed. Back on Earth, mission control just absolutely erupted. People were cheering, joining millions of others celebrating all over the world. We had done it. Humans had successfully landed on another world.
Part 4. One giant leap.
Several hours after touching down, Armstrong pops open the hatch and starts climbing down the ladder of the lunar module. As his boot finally presses into that dusty lunar surface, he says those words that will echo through history forever. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. With that single, iconic step, the moment was cemented for all of time. Buzz Aldrin joins him shortly after, and the two of them spend over 2 hours just exploring this completely alien landscape. And it wasn't a walk in the park. The lunar surface was incredibly hard just beneath that top layer of dust, which made planting the American flag notoriously difficult. They collected lunar rocks, set up vital scientific experiments. Oh, and here's a really wild detail. When they eventually climbed back into the cabin, both astronauts noticed that the moon dust clinging to their spacesuits actually had a distinct smell. They said it smelled almost exactly like spent gunpowder.
Part 5. Return and Legacy. So after totally nailing their surface mission, Armstrong and Aldrin blasted back off the moon for a high-stakes orbital reunion with Collins. Once they were safely reunited, they fired up the engines for that 240,000-mile trip back home. Looking back, the rapid timeline of this whole thing is just astounding. Think about it. From JFK's massive promise in 1961 to the thunderous launch on July 16, 1969, the historic landing on the 20th, all the way to July 24, 1969, with a totally safe splashdown in the Pacific Ocean where recovery teams were waiting to welcome them back as absolute heroes. At the end of the day, the true legacy of this mission really boils down to 3 forces: determination, science, and teamwork. By perfectly combining those 3 elements, humanity proved that we could tackle something that literally everyone thought was impossible. Even now, well over half a century later, the Apollo 11 mission stands as one of the absolute greatest achievements in human history. Because, let's be real, it wasn't just a victory for America, it was a massive, unifying victory for all of humanity. Which leaves us with a pretty powerful thought to chew on. The moon landing is this permanent, shining reminder of our shared potential. So if we can reach the stars when we dare to dream beyond the impossible, what in the world is humanity going to achieve next? Definitely something to think about.